West Ham are currently 19th in the Premier League table. And as I sit here just reflecting on how bad we've been in the last few years, can't help but think back to all the comments that I've seen saying we should have been careful what we wished for because we wanted Moyes out, should have kept Moyes. And it's really made me look and ask the question to myself really of, do I regret wanting Moyes out? So let's talk about it. It can't be denied that Moyes did a great job as West Ham manager. You know, back to back European tours, 6th, then 7th, and a trophy, giving us some unbelievable memories and some great nights supporting West Ham. And those nights seem like a distant memory. So why did West Ham fans want him out when he did such an amazing job? Not every West Ham fan did want David Moyes out. In fact, it was the most divided I'd ever seen the fan base, to be honest with you. Constant arguing, bickering, back and forth, point scoring. Every single week, Moyes would win. Then the Moyes in crowd would say, "Oh, I told you so." Moyes would lose. The Moyes out crowd would say, "I told you so." I just wanted a united fan base again. And that is probably one of the positives of where we are now. The fan base hasn't felt so united in years. However, the team has just not felt so lost as it has in years. And that, coupled with a myriad of other reasons for why I wanted Moyes out, was just the icing on the cake, and we'll get into those reasons. So let's look at the first main reason I had for wanting Moyes out. So I'd say one of the main reasons myself and a lot of fans wanted a change came down to the style of football. It's no secret. This is one of the big issues that non-West Ham fans bring up when they say, you know, why we should have been careful what we wish for. Has to be the style of football we played. Now, there's a misconception that West Ham fans have never enjoyed Moyes' style of football. When we were in lockdown and we were playing counter-attacking football, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot more enjoyable than what we'd seen the previous season under Pellegrini. Okay, we didn't have a lot of the ball, but when we had the ball, we were quick and we were direct and we were creating chances. You know, seeing the likes of, you know, Jesse Lingard bombing it down the wings, creating chances, scoring goals. It was electric. And, you know, going into the following season, our first season back in Europe in some time, thoroughly enjoyed myself. The big issue with the style of football ultimately came down to Moyes trying to progress to a more possession-based system. And that is the style of football that really sort of sped up my urge to see a new manager come in. I recognised this early on, I believe in the second season, that the way we were playing was not sustainable to be playing on the counter. Because, you know, as we're finishing 6th and 7th, teams are starting to pay us more respect on the pitch, which means they're leaving defenders deeper. It means that they're allowing us to have more of the ball. And we struggled to know what to do with it. We struggled to break teams down. So Moyes quite correctly identified this is an issue. We need to progress to be a team that is more comfortable with the ball, that is better in possession, a more possession-based team. And that's what he tried to do. And it didn't really work. And this is where my real issues with the football came. because it was painful to watch. When we had the ball, we were very just pedestrian, passing the ball sideways and backwards throughout the game. Players off the ball not really making runs. Just seemed to have no real idea. And the problem is, when we didn't have the ball, we weren't pressing and trying to win the ball back as quickly as possible to get it back in our possession, like a top sort of possession-based team would. We sat off like a counter-attacking team and waited for the opposition to lose the ball. And then we got the ball and we didn't really counter. You'd have one player, whether it be Kudus or Antonio previous to that, bombing it up the pitch by themselves. And they'd find the same issue. They'd get up the pitch and they'd run into 2-3 defenders surrounding them, no one to lay it off to. It was agonizing to watch. And really, for me, I wanted to see something different. Unfortunately, for me, we didn't see anything different. Lopetegui come in and it was the same football. Potter replaced him and it was the same football. So it might lead you to believe maybe the problem wasn't Moyes' fault and maybe all of it wasn't. But he started that process to building that team. And it's a team those other managers inherited, and we'll get onto those managers for sure. And ultimately, it was a big reason why I wanted him gone. And listen, we're going to go and start to get into the next reason. So probably the main reason I personally wanted to see a change was the results. You know, besides the football, the results, in fact, they go hand in hand for me, and I'll tell you why. First of all, we were in relegation form. The season we won the Conference League, we were in a relegation battle. Pure and simple. It was painful in the league. And right now, Crystal Palace are obviously up top 6 and they're going for the Conference League. Now, if they're to do well in the league this season and win the Conference League, I think that's going to show that it didn't require us to completely sacrifice our league form to win that trophy. Like I said, we were easily the favourites. Ultimately, look, when I look back on that season, 14th in a trophy, I'm happy with the trophy, without a doubt. But when looking at the bigger picture in terms of where we're going as a football club at the time, it was concerning. That last season, the results that we got, we were conceding goals at an alarming rate. 6 to Arsenal at home, 4 to Villa, 5 to Fulham, 5 to Palace, 5 to Chelsea. We were getting battered whilst playing some of the most boring football I've ever seen in my life. Can anyone blame fans for saying enough's enough? We need something else. We cannot continue this way. There was no real indication that things were going to change. So there was hope that a new manager could come in and breathe new life into the group of players that we had, bring some more players in, and we can kick on and improve on the foundation that David Moyes had built. But as we know, that wasn't to be. And we'll talk about my regrets with Moyes, and if I take responsibility, and the fans should take responsibility. because we really did have some great times under David Moyes, and I'll forever be grateful. I'll forever hold him in high regard, have a lot of respect for him, for what he's done, and be appreciative, and he'll have a big role in the club's history. So I do have some regrets for wanting David Moyes out of West Ham United. I'd be lying if I say I didn't. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently with the current situation. But before I get into what those regrets are, I don't think fans were wrong for wanting a change based on everything that I've talked about, how bad the football was and the relegation form, conceding a ridiculous amount of goals, particularly in London derbies. I don't think it's wrong for fans to want change. And Postecoglou delivered Spurs their first trophy in 20 years, their first European trophy in 50 years, 40 years, however long it was. And he was sacked because they finished 17th and were in relegation form, and they could not see the sustainability of it. And you look back on it and you say, well, do you know what? It's harsh, but it's the right decision. We didn't do that in the season Moyes won the Conference League. I remember saying clearly at the time, Moyes deserves another season after winning that trophy. And what a night, what a memory. Honestly, the feeling was unbelievable, and the parade, it was a really good time. And I don't regret wanting Moyes to stay on the back of that season, but yeah, I do have some regrets for wanting him out, and hindsight is a big part of that. Because while fans did want a change for Moyes, that change was not Julian Lopetegui. I don't remember any fan calling for Lopetegui to be the one to come in if Moyes goes. I look back on it now and I feel like I took my eye off the ball in those last few years of what the real problem at this club was, is, and always will be, and that's David Sullivan. You know, there was a belief with how good we'd been that if we just got a fresh mind through the door, a really top quality manager, that we could build on the foundations that Moyes set and go to greater heights, enjoy watching the team again, and maintain our or get back to playing European football. How naive, you know, because we went into Julian Lopetegui, which was an absolute disaster, then into Graham Potter, who was another huge disaster. And I look back and I say, maybe we should have just kept Moyes. In hindsight, we were right for wanting a change, but if you ask me now, knowing that change was Lopetegui or Potter, would I go back in time and say we should keep Moyes? I would say yes. Now, here's the thing. People blame West Ham fans, or a portion of West Ham fans, for hounding David Moyes out of the football club. Yes, there was a section of the fan base that were vocal. Now, I never sang any David Moyes out songs at any football matches, but I did give my opinion online and said I think we should change the manager. If you think that's hounding him out, that's up to you. But I don't believe it was in our control. David Moyes, on the back of our 2-0 win at the Emirates, was offered a new contract. One that was rescinded after the next run of defeats we had shortly after. Now, was that because of the fans? Or was that because of Sullivan, Divering David Sullivan, making decisions on a whim? And it was absolutely because of Sullivan. It weren't, oh no, the fans are unhappy, so we're going to take the contract away. And they weren't able to agree a new deal. We brought Tim Steidten into the club to be our technical director of football, whatever you want to call it. And they wanted to change David Moyes' job role into a head coach. That was the role that they wanted to move down. Now, this is a direction that I agreed with overall, because you have someone, a football person running the football operations, they're the consistency at the club. Then when a manager goes, they're responsible for finding a manager who plays the way that they see the club playing. So you don't have to rebuild time and time again. But this was the issue. Moyes is a traditional, old school football manager. He's not a head coach. He doesn't want to be a head coach. He wants to run the football side of things. He wants to choose the players. So it was never going to work out, and it didn't. Moyes said thanks but no thanks and walked away, and we went in another direction. So it was never in our hands. It was never in the fans' control. Now maybe if fans were more vocal in support of Moyes and there wasn't a Moyes out, it probably would have put a little bit less pressure on. But they'd made the decision to bring Steidten in regardless. Steidten was there that season. That was the way they wanted to go. So regardless, there would have been friction and it wouldn't have worked out. You know, we had a transfer committee of Sullivan, Steidten and Moyes picking players. That just cannot work. That's a disaster. So ultimately, it was the best decision at the time for Moyes and West Ham to part ways. But in hindsight, I would have rather have stuck with Moyes than brought in Lopetegui and Graham Potter. Now, whether we would have been back up in Europe, I don't think so. But having Moyes there and us just focusing on Sullivan. Sullivan, you know, really has Moyes to thank, because it allowed Moyes to paper over a lot of the cracks of his ownership, and him going, and what has followed has just reminded everyone of who the real problem is at this club. I look at that last season, yes, we finished 9th. We were in European places when those contract negotiations were going down. Of course, we'd just beat Arsenal. And I do think the lack of direction and clarity on the future of the manager probably did have an impact. I've been very clear that I think Moyes should have been offered a new deal at the start of the season and then sacked like every other manager if he was unsuccessful. But this is Sullivan. He wants to do things cheap. He wants to let managers run their contract down so he can let them go for nothing. That's the Sullivan way, and this is why we're in the situation is. It's nothing to do with the fans. It's all down to David Sullivan and how he runs this football club. He should have been more decisive. Stop letting managers run down their contracts like he did with Big Sam. He was in the top 4 and then we fell off a cliff. This is a real problem. So hindsight's a wonderful thing. Yes, Moyes would have been the best man to probably be in place over Lopetegui and Potter during this period. But at the same time, if he had stayed, we probably would have never have come to this point where we are so united against the ownership, because there would have been a still focus on Moyes in, Moyes out. I think it was ultimately for the best in the long term. But I look back on that time, and I think we all should, with fond memories, and leave it in the past as just that, fond memories. So I thought I would just do this video as my last way of addressing it. and we can all just look forward. What's done is done. Now we have our job to do, which is getting David Sullivan out of this football club once and for all. And whether it works, it works. People think that fans had a big influence on Sullivan to get rid of Moyes, to not give him the contracts he wanted and to let him run down the deal. But these same people think that we don't have an influence to get him out of the football club. He'll do what he wants to do. He don't care about the fans. That's a contradiction. It can't work both ways. So let's see. It don't hurt to try. So Moyes, I thank you for those years in Europe. I thank you for the trophy, and I wish you all the best of luck. But I really do think overall it was the right move for both parties, and he's doing well at Everton. So let me know how you guys feel. Do you think we should have kept Moyes, or was it right to part ways?